Hi everyone, welcome to the live session for Structure, Form and Architecture, the Synergy. We will start within 5 minutes. Let other people also join. We will start within 5 minutes. So we'll see when others join. I'll start with the session now. Others may join in between. So hello and welcome to everybody who has joined for the live session for Structure, Form and Architecture. This is an NPTEL course, and the course instructor for this course is Professor Shubhajit Sadhu Khan from IIT Roorkee, and I'm the NPTEL course TA for this course. I'm Shreya Shukla, and I'm currently doing my PhD from IIT Roorkee. Today we will be doing week 2 assignment 2. So just to make it clear, we do previous year questions in these live sessions. We don't do this year's questions, and I'll just start. So I have covered this in the last session itself, but I'm covering it again. Structure, form and architecture. Structure it refers to the system which is used to support and transmit possible loads in the building. Form means the shape or the three-dimensional form is a three-dimensional object or a building that is perceived by a viewer in space and time. It's basically shape. It's how we see something in the world. And architecture is the art and technique of designing and building. And synergy means combining 2 or 3 organizations or agents to produce a combined greater effect. So for week 2, the syllabus that has been covered is Connecting Structure and Architecture Part 1, Connecting Structure and Architecture Part 2, Structural Transformation in the Architectural History, Factors Affecting the Structural Forms, and Learning from Animals Architecture. Without any further ado, we will start with the session now. So assignment 2, previous year question 1. Which of the following column type is shown in the image below? So image has been given of a column type, and 4 options have been given: Doric, Ionic, Corinthian and Tuscan. So I will quickly describe what all these orders look like so that you guys have a better understanding. So first of all, Greeks developed the 3 basic decorative systems or orders, which is Doric, Ionic and Corinthian. And then Romans developed 2 more orders after being inspired by the Greek style, which were Tuscan and Composite. So Doric, Ionic and Corinthian are Greek orders, and Tuscan and Composite are Roman orders. So this is how basically all the 5 orders look like: Doric, Ionic, Corinthian, Tuscan and Composite. Now I will quickly explain each order one by one. I hope I'm audible and it's clear. Yeah, so I'll start. Doric order. So what happens in Doric order is that Doric orders are massive and they are more plain compared to the other orders or other columns. They are the first and the most oldest orders, and they have tapering columns. Tapering columns means that the width of the columns decreases with the height. So they have tapering columns and they have flutes. Flutes means these lines you see on the column in the image, these are called flutes. Basically they are either curved in concave wise or convex wise, and these parts are called flutes. So this is what a Doric order is. They have a very plain capital with no decoration, simple plain capital. I'm explaining this because we have 2 in detail, because we have 2-3 questions similar based on this specific information. So it will be easier for you to understand all those questions if I explain all the orders in the start itself. Then we have Ionic orders. These are the second type of orders in Greek orders. They are more slender and ornate. So if you compare it with Doric order, you see that Doric order is a little thick on the base and they have a tapering column, while in Ionic order it's more slender, it's a little slimmer, and they have scroll-like capital. So you see in Ionic order we have a very simple bowl-like capital, and in Ionic order we have scroll-like capital. Then we have Corinthian order. Corinthian columns are similar to Ionic columns, as in the base and the entablature is same, but their capital is very different. Their capital is very ornamentative, and it's really detailed. It's very ornamentation. There's a lot of ornamentation in this capital, and the ornamentation is inspired by nature, by acanthus leaves to be specific. So this is how these three orders look like. Now what is Tuscan? Tuscan is very similar to Doric. Tuscan is a Roman order, Doric is a Greek order, and they are very similar. However, there is a difference. Tuscan columns are traditionally more slender than Doric column. A Doric column is stocky and usually without a base. Shaft of a Tuscan column is usually smooth, while Doric column usually has flutes. So how is Tuscan different from Doric? Both the column styles are very simple. So the most important difference is that in Tuscan, the column, we have base, we have column, we have the capital. So the column is plain. While we saw in Doric that it has flutes, it has ribbed flutes. In Tuscan, it is plain. So the capital is very similar. It's the same plain basic order. So the easiest way to identify a Tuscan from a Doric would be that Tuscan column is smooth and Doric column has flutes. Now coming back to the capitals in detail, this is how it looks like. So you can see Tuscan and Doric, they are very similar looking, but Tuscan has plain column, Doric has flutes. Ionic has scroll. Corinthian is very decorative based on leaves, and in composite is also a Roman order. So what happens in composite is that different capital styles of different column styles, different order styles are combined into one. That's why it is called composite. So our answer will, oh sorry, this is wrong. It's Doric. This was done by mistake. I am so sorry for the confusion. So the answer is that this is Doric, because this is the most plain column, and you can see it has ribbed flutes. It is not plain, so this is Doric, not Tuscan. Question number 2. Which of the following column styles was used in Auckland War Memorial Museum? So to be able to answer this question again, you should be knowing the different column styles, and you should be knowing how the Auckland War Memorial Museum looks like. So for reference, I've added this picture. This is a museum and war memorial in Auckland, New Zealand. This was built in 1920s, and it is based on neoclassical style. So when you look at this building and when you look at this column, it's very easy to identify which type of column is this. First of all, we see the capital. The capital is very simple, which means this would be probably Doric. Then we look at the column, and then we see the column has flutes. The column is not plain. Because it has flutes and the capital is simple, that's why this is Doric. Question number 3. Potter Building in New York City is an appropriate example of ornamentation of structure, structure as ornament, structure as architecture, none of the above. So in case you have gone through the NPTEL lectures of Professor Shubhajit Sadhu Khan, he explains it very well in his in the lecture and in the presentation, the different relationship between structure and architecture, in which he has categorized it into 5 types. First is ornamentation of structure, second is structure of ornament, third is structure of architecture, fourth is structure accepted, fifth is structure ignored. Just excuse me. Yeah. So relationship of architecture to structure. So what happens, I'll quickly explain all these 5 terms so we will be able to easily answer the questions. So first is ornamentation of structure. So it's as simple as it is written. There is a structure, and then there is ornamentation on structure. So we are very familiar with the term ornamentation in architecture, which basically means detailing or designing over something. So ornamentation of structure means that there is a structure and then there is some kind of decoration over it. So there is ornamentation or decoration done on the structure. It is beautification. Simplest example would be Greek columns or the Greek buildings in the Greek classical times. So they have post and beam structure. They have column and beam structure. And then once that structure is done, that it's a structure, it's a column beam structure, and then those columns are decorated. So this means that it is ornamentation of structure. Then we have structure as ornament. For example, that structure itself is acting like an ornament. It could be an exposed structure, it could be exposed service, and the structure is very visually pleasing, so it can be considered as structure as ornament. Then structure as architecture. So structure as ornament, the example would be Millennium Dome, um, and there would be Pompidou Center in Paris, because the building is characterized by the structure. You will see some images. I'll make it more clear in the following slides. Then structure as architecture. Architecture that consists of only structure, very long spans or very tall buildings, lightness and portability. So structure as architecture means that there is nothing else except the structure. For example, Eiffel Tower is considered as a monument, as a piece of architecture, but it is an entire structure. It's an entire steel and iron structure. So that is an example of structure as architecture. Then structure accepted and structure ignored. These basically means that you're designing something and then you do structure of that design, and then as the structure comes, you accept it. There is no ornamentation added, there is just simple form, simple design, and it has cohesion with the structure. That means it's a structure accepted building. And when we talk about structure ignored, in that it means that the form is so dynamic that the structure is not important. The form is important and structure has been molded according to the form. For example, Opera House Sydney, all of Zaha Hadid's work, Notre Dame Chapel, all these buildings, they have been designed, the form is fixed, and then the structure has adapted to that form, which means that the structure is ignored, but rather form is more important. So our question actually was that Potter Building in New York is an appropriate example of what? And we were given 4 options. So just to brief about Potter Building. So this is how the Potter Building in New York City looks like. It was built in 1883 by architect Norris Gershom Starkweather. It was one of the first iron framed buildings, and the base has a iron facade and the remaining stories have a red brick and terracotta facade. Each side has a similar ornamentation containing columns, capitals, pediments, corbels, panels, and segmental arches made of terracotta. So if you look at this building closely and at the description also, this is a proper structural building. This is a first iron framed buildings, and then you see that the facade has been, there is a lot of ornamentation on the facade done over the structure. So our answer would be ornamentation of structure. Question number 4. Lloyd's headquarters building in London is an example of 4 options again. Ornamentation of structure, structure as ornament, structure as architecture. So this is how the Lloyd's building in London looks like. It was built in 1986. It is also known as the Inside Out building. It was built by Richard Rogers and Partners, and the structural engineer was Arup. It is known as Inside Out building because all the services were outside the building, all the staircase and all the services. So they had a plain square plan, plain rectangular orthogonal plan, and then they had all the services outside the building. So when you actually look at the plan, this is the plan of the building. They provided a clear space for the building, and then they provided all the staircase and the washrooms, all the services outside that. It was considered to be a very innovative building because its services such as staircases, lifts, ductwork, electrical power and conduits and water pipes were all on the outside, and that left a really uncluttered space inside. So if you look at this building again, you see that all these services, they are a part of structure. They are a structural part of the building. These services, all the pipes that are going and all the staircase that is going on. And you see how that has been used to create some kind of aesthetic or a different kind of facade, which makes this structure as ornament. So the main difference between ornamentation of structure and structure as ornament is that ornamentation of structure means that the column and the beam structure has been made and then the decoration has been done on it. While in structure as ornament, it means that the structure itself is being used in ornament. So because the services, you can see the services around the building, they have different shape, they have different sizes. It makes it into a dynamic facade, which makes the structure look like an ornament. Also, it is structural, all these services, because it's all shear wall and columns, so it is structural part. Question number 5. Arrange in chronological order the following styles in architectural history. P. Rococo, Q. Byzantine, R. Beaux Arts, and 5. Baroque. So to be able to answer this, you should remember the timeline of the architectural styles in history, and I have added a timeline which I have taken reference from the internet, and I would quickly explain that to you. So I'll just do full screen for this because the text is very tiny. Yeah, so the earliest that I have added that is present on this timeline is ancient Egypt, which had powerful rulers and they constructed monumental pyramids and temples and shrines. We also have Mesopotamian and other kind of architectural styles during this time, even Indus Valley civilization. These are some of the oldest civilizations in time. Then we have classical. Classical, from the rise of ancient Greece until the fall of the Roman Empire, great buildings were considered, and classical order, the classical style has been characterized by the columns, their post and lintel construction, and yeah, it's even very common right now in a lot of buildings, the reason being the style of neoclassicism. So yeah, that's classical period, the Roman and Greek architecture. Then we have Byzantine, which is early Christian and medieval architecture. It was mostly common in Europe, and it moved from rectangular basilica forms to the classically inspired Byzantine style. Then we have Romanesque period, and it happened because Rome spread across Europe, and heavy and stocky Romanesque architecture with rounded arches became common. Then we have Gothic architecture. In Gothic architecture, the best cathedrals or the greatest cathedrals of Europe were built in Gothic architecture, and it included lots of pointy towers, flying buttress, arched windows. All those things were part of Gothic architecture. Then Renaissance architecture. So what happened during Renaissance? Renaissance means rebirth. Around that, the ideas, a return of classical style was brought in Italy, France, and England, because the Gothic became too ornamented. So this has been the trend through the entire architectural styles. There would come a point where people would go back to extreme detailing, extreme ornamentation, and then that becomes saturated, and then they come back to again the old orders or the old styles to make it a little simpler. That has been the up and down of the entire architectural style in just a glance, not necessarily, but in a glance. Then after Renaissance, we again had Baroque. So you see, we had Gothic architecture, which was very ornamentation oriented. Then we had Renaissance, which went back to classical ideas. Then we again had Baroque. Baroque style is again reflected in dramatic churches. They used irregular shapes and extravagant ornamentation. In France, the highly ornamented Baroque style combines with classical restraint, and Russian aristocrats were impressed by the Versailles in France and incorporated Baroque ideas in the building of St. Petersburg, and then elements of the elaborate Baroque style are found throughout Europe. Then we have Rococo. During the last phase of the Baroque period, builders constructed graceful white buildings with a lot of ornamentation and heavy detailings, but very free flowing detailings. That was what was Rococo architecture. Then American colonial architecture, and then Georgian architecture. These were some other periods. Then neoclassical. So after a whole detailed ornamentation periods of Baroque and Rococo, we had neoclassical again. What happened in neoclassical again? A renewed interest in ideas of Renaissance, and it led to the return of classical styles in all of Europe, Britain, and US. So again, a lot of buildings constructed during this neoclassical era used the Greek temple elements a lot in their buildings, which we will see in a few examples in the next slides. Then we had Greek revival architecture, which is very similar to neoclassical architecture. And then we had Victorian architecture, and then arts and crafts movement and Art Nouveau in architecture. So what started happening was that industrial revolution happened around 1850s, and because 1800s, and because of industrial revolution, a lot of things became easier to construct because we had materials, we had learned our way around machines. So, and because industries were being set up, so everything started, mass production became easier. So to counteract that industrialization, to actually counteract that industrialization was making everything look same, was making everything lose ornamentation, arts and crafts and Art Nouveau movements started. What happened in arts and crafts was that it revived an interest in handicrafts, and it sought a spiritual connection with the surrounding environment, both natural and man-made. And in arts and crafts movement, you again see the revival of handicrafts. Handicrafts was promoted more. Because of industrialization, there was mass production which was creating everything same. So they started arts and crafts which rooted in handicrafts or things designed with little ornamentation, you can say, and not machine made completely. Then how is Art Nouveau different? Arts and crafts. Art Nouveau used absolutely asymmetrical and organic shapes, organic arches, decorative surfaces with curved designs. Antonio Gaudi, if you're familiar with his work, if you're not, you can go and search about him. Antonio Gaudi was a Spanish architect who is the most famous Art Nouveau architect, who has a lot of famous buildings, especially in Spain, which have a lot of free form, lot of free lines, organic forms, and you can see his examples online. Then we had Beaux Art architecture. It is also called Beaux Art classicism. It was academic classicism or classical revival. Beaux Art architecture is characterized by order, symmetry, formal design, grandiosity, and elaborate ornamentation. Then we had Neo-Gothic architecture, which meant that medieval Gothic ideas were applied to modern skyscrapers. So skyscrapers came into being in around 1900s, and Neo-Gothic architecture happened, in which Neo-Gothic styles or Neo-Gothic ornamentation, extreme ornamentation, was applied to modern skyscrapers. Then Art Deco happened. Art Deco used a lot of zigzag patterns and vertical lines, and they also involved a lot of inspiration from different machines that were being created. For example, they were heavily in the Art Deco, in a lot of places they were heavily inspired by naval architecture, because ships were a whole new thing. They were so fascinating. So they would use streamlined curves in their buildings like the ships have, or their round windows. So all those were part of Art Deco. And then the 20th century trends in architecture started, the whole modernism, postmodernism, and other things. So this is the basic plain timeline. Uh, so going back to the question, the question was arrange these in the chronological order of the following styles in architectural history: Rococo, Byzantine, Beaux Arts, or Baroque. So from this timeline, we see that Byzantine is the earliest one. Then we had Baroque, then we have Rococo, then we have Beaux Arts. So Byzantine is Q. Q would be the first. Excuse me. Then we have Baroque. Then we have uh, Rococo. And then we have Beaux Arts. So our answer would be C, Q, S, P, R. Excuse me. So question number 6. Hagia Irene is an example of dash architecture: Roman, Byzantine, Gothic, and Baroque. So you all must have heard of Hagia Sophia in Turkey. So Hagia Irene is also in Istanbul, Turkey. It's an Eastern Orthodox church. It's now a museum. It's located in Istanbul, Turkey. Hagia Irene has the typical form of a Roman basilica. It consists of a nave and two aisles. It has semicircular arches, and the materials used are brick and stone. And yeah, so quickly talking about the Roman, Gothic, Baroque, and Byzantine architecture, a few of the points about them. So Roman architecture, it lasted from 509 BC to about 4th century AD. Romans mainly utilized the Greek classical orders, but also created a new composite and Tuscan order. Roman architecture had domes, walls, aedicules, which were small shrines designed as small temples. And coffers were also popular elements of classical and imperial Roman architecture. Then Byzantine architecture. The capital of the Roman Empire moved to Byzantium, now called Istanbul, in 330 AD. And Roman architecture evolved into a graceful, classically inspired style. They used brick instead of stone. They had domed roofs, they had elaborate mosaics, and they had classical forms. Then Gothic architecture, there were pointed arches, ribbed vaulting are very common, flying buttresses. Other informations led to more taller, more graceful architecture. Then Gothic ideas gave rise to magnificent cathedrals like Chartres and Notre Dame. Baroque architecture. Baroque architecture is reflected in opulent and dramatic churches with irregular shapes and extravagant ornamentation. And elements of the Baroque style were found throughout Europe, and Baroque style has been heavily used in Russian countries, especially in the building of St. Petersburg. So coming back to the image, you can see that it has domes. It's made out of bricks. It's located in Istanbul, Turkey, which was the Byzantine capital. So our answer is Byzantine. Hagia Irene is an example of Byzantine architecture. Question number 7. Which of the following building is an example of Gothic architecture? Notre Dame de Chartres, France. Pantheon, Rome; Villa Rotonda, Italy; Basilica of Saint Sernin, Toulouse. uh, which of the following buildings is an example of Gothic architecture? So, Gothic architecture, it is characterized by pointed arches, ribbed vaulting, flying buttresses, more taller and more graceful architecture, and heavy ornamentation. So these are the four buildings that have been mentioned in the question: Notre Dame des Chartres, France; Pantheon, Rome; Villa Rotonda, Italy; Basilica of Saint Sernin, Toulouse. Uh, so Notre Dame des Chartres, France, has Gothic architecture. You can see the pointed towers. You can see the ornamentation. And Pantheon, Rome, has Roman architecture. If you can see, the columns are composite columns, and it is in Rome. Villa Rotonda in Italy has Renaissance architecture, and Basilica of Saint Sernin, Toulouse, has Romanesque architecture. So our answer is Notre Dame des Chartres, France. Question number 8. Which of the following examples are referred to as live load on a structure? Settlement load, wind load, rain load, and thermal load. So first of all, I'll tell you what is live load. Live load is the load on a structure that changes. And there are two types of main loads: dead and live. Dead load is the load of the structure itself, or the parts of a building, which cannot be changed, which cannot be moved. So that's dead load. Then live load are things that are movable or that change or that are added later. For example, humans walking in a building are live load. Furniture being added to the building are live load. So we have four options being given here: settlement load, wind load, rain load, and thermal load. And it has been asked which of the following are referred as live load on a structure. So I'll quickly talk about it. Live loads are also called imposed loads, and they are either moving loads or movable loads. They do not have any impact or acceleration. All of these loads are part of what an occupant brings into the building. These items are normally furniture and movable partitions. Imposed loads are temporary, changeable, or dynamic loads acting upon a structure. The magnitude of these loads is typically related to the occupancy of the space or building where the load is applied. Live loads are those loads produced by the use of occupancy of a building or structure and do not include construction loads, environmental loads, such as wind, snow, rain, earthquake, and flood, or death loads. I'm I lost the connection. I'm trying to connect to the meeting again. I hope I get connected. No. I am so sorry. I had a technical problem because of which I lost the connection. I'm so sorry. I have rejoined the meeting. I'm sharing the slides again. I am so sorry for the disruption. It was a technical issue, and I was having internet problems and as well as with my computer. I'm really sorry. I'll start again. Which of the following examples are referred to as live load on a structure? And then the options given are settlement load, wind load, rain load, and thermal load. So I explain what are live loads. Live loads are also called imposed loads, and they are either moving loads or movable loads and do not have any impact on acceleration. All these loads are part of what an occupant brings into the building. These items are normally furniture and movable partitions. Imposed loads are temporary, changeable, or dynamic loads acting upon a structure. The magnitude of this load is typically related to the occupancy of the space or building where the load is applied. Live loads are loads produced by the use of occupancy of a building or structure and do not include construction loads, environmental loads, or dead loads. So the answer that has been given for this is D, all PQRS. However, I think there was a minor mistake in the question, that these are not live load but rather dynamic load. So the original question was, which of the following examples are referred to as live load on a structure, and all these 4 points are mentioned, and then the answer was supposed to be D. But these are not live load. Live load is specifically the load that comes from the occupation of the building, and it does not include construction loads, environmental loads, or dead loads. So the question should have been, which of the following examples are referred as dynamic load on a structure, and then D option would be correct. Moving to question number 9. Which of the following building is an appropriate example of structure ignored in form making? So structure ignored in form making basically means that the form has been designed or imagined in a very peculiar way or a very bizarre way, and the structure had to be molded according to the form rather than the building being molded according to the structure. So the 4 examples are Burj Khalifa, Dubai; New York's Chrysler Building, New York City; Chapel of Notre Dame du Hart, France; the 42, Kolkata. Structure ignored in form making. Structural considerations played very little part in the determination of the form, not leading to a compromise to the structural requirement. The structural considerations may have been ignored in the determination of form, but that does not mean that it is structurally unstable. It has been made stable via other ways. Used when the form is unorthodox or organic. Structure is not considered to give aesthetics form to architecture. So this is how the 4 buildings that have been mentioned look like. Burj Khalifa, Dubai; Chapel of Notre Dame du Hart, France; Chrysler Building, NYC; and 42, Kolkata. You see that there is a very commonality between 3 buildings. All 3 are skyscrapers in different parts of the world, and all 3 follow some kind of structure when you look at them. They have posts, they have columns, they have some kind of structure. While when you look at Chapel of Notre Dame, you see a very organic form, very curved surfaces. The roof is curved also. The roof is even not straight. So our answer is Chapel of Notre Dame du Hart, France, because it is not an example of structure. It is an appropriate example of structure ignored in form making. The structure was not basically the form was important, the curves were important, and then the way around the structure was found later. Question number 10. I have done, I think, 16 questions for today. Sorry, 16 or 17 questions. So we are at question number 10 now. After that, I will start the live Q&A where you can ask your questions and I will try to answer them at best of my capacity. And in case I will not be able to answer it, I will answer it in the next class. After reading on it. 10th, match the following animal architecture and the animal. P, sociable weaver; Q, termite; R, social wasp; and S, Vogelkoop bowerbird. So 4 images have been given of 4 different animal architecture, and 4 animals' name have been given, and you have to match it and then answer this question. So I would quickly tell you what is what. So the first one that we see the image is a termite mound or termite tower. It is made up with mud, chewed wood, saliva, and feces. Then second image we see are paper nests, which are made by wasps. I'm extremely sorry for the disturbance. I am having some issues today. I'm extremely sorry for the disturbance. Please bear with me. I'm trying my best here. Once the screen is shared, I'll continue again. I'm extremely sorry that this is happening and there is some interruption in the class. I'm really sorry for the inconvenience. I have shared my screen. Once it is visible, I'll start again with the question that I was doing. And in case you missed out on any questions that I have explained because of the bad connection, just let me know later when I'm done with the questions. I would repeat those questions again too. Yeah, I think the screen is shared again. I will start again. So the question was, four images have been given and four animals have been given, and you have to match which of the building, which of the animal architecture is done by which of the animal. So first image that we see is a termite mound or a termite tower. It is made out of mud, chewed wood, saliva and feces. It is made by termites. Second image we see are paper nests, which are made out of plant pulp, wooden particles, saliva, secretions, and it is made by the wasps. Third we see is a bower, and which is built by a bower bird. Bower birds make small huts of grass and sticks, and then they gather fruits to decorate their places. Then fifth we see is a community dwelling of dwelling housing of birds. It is made out of grass and sticks. So coming back to the question, P, which is sociable weaver, is 4, the community housing of birds. Q, termite, is 1. R, social wasp, is 2. And S, vogelkop, bower bird, is 3. So our answer is B, P4, Q1, R2, S3. Question number 11. Which of the following is an example of structure as ornament? Parthenon, Centre Pompidou, Paris, Habitat 67 and Taj Mahal. What is structure as ornament? I have already explained it. I'll just say one line again. The structure itself acts as an ornament. It is usually done when the structure is exposed. Structure and the services are exposed. It is considered as structure as ornament. The structure is used aesthetically and itself is usually pleasing without added ornamentation. So the 4 buildings that have been mentioned are Parthenon, Centre Pompidou, Paris, Habitat 67 and Taj Mahal. So these are the 4 buildings. So when you look at these buildings, so in the first example, Parthenon, it's definitely ornamentation of structure, because you see there is a very basic plain structure of column beam, and then it was decorated and then it was ornamented. So it would be structure as ornamentation. But when we look at again, same with Taj Mahal, then when we look at actually Centre Pompidou in Paris, it is one of the most famous buildings which have exposed services on the outside of the building. They use different colored pipes for different services. They have all the services on outside, and it has a very different kind of aesthetic. So our answer would be Centre Pompidou in Paris. It's an example of structure as ornament, which means that structure is being used. Structure itself is being used as an aesthetic element. I'm extremely sorry. There's a really bad connection on my end today, and it's creating a lot of problems because there have been a lot of differences. But this meeting is being recorded, and the PPT will be shared with you. So please, if you, I'm sorry for the inconvenience. Please go through the uploaded YouTube video later when you'll get the link, and you can also go through the PPT. And if you have specific doubts in mind, please ask them after I'm done with it. I'm really sorry that this is happening a lot today. So we were at question 11. Which of the following buildings is an example of structure as ornament, which means that the structure itself is being used an ornament, that structure itself is being treated as I am extremely sorry for the bad connection from my end. I would um, I'm extremely sorry. It's actually not in my hand. Sorry for the bad connection. It's just really poor network today. It could probably because of the weather, because it's been raining here where I am. Really sorry for this. So I was saying that the session is being recorded, and the PPT, whatever I'm speaking, is being recorded, even if this is being recorded, and it will be uploaded on YouTube. So in case you miss out on something, you can go through the YouTube video, and which would be easier. I would probably re-record the session specifically for today, because there was so many disturbance because of internet. And yeah, and the PPT anyway I would be sharing, so you will have access to all the information. I apologize again for the inconvenience. I'll just start again. I really hope it does not happen again. So yeah, we are supposed to tell which one of these from these four buildings is the one which says that structure is ornament, which that means that structure itself is being used for aesthetics. Structure is being used for aesthetics, for ornamentation. So when you look at these building, Centre Pompidou in Paris actually has service and the structure, exposed service and structure, and the entire aesthetic of the building is defined by the structure of the building. So our answer would be Centre Pompidou in Paris. Question number 12. Millennium Dome in London is the best fitted example of ornamentation of structure, structure as ornament, structure of architecture, none of the above. So Millennium, this is what Millennium Dome looks like. It was built in 1999. The height is 95 meters. It comes under high-tech architecture. The engineer was Ian Liddell, and the architects were Richard Rogers and Mike Davies. It's a tension fabric structure, and it is supported with cable and vertical posts. So as I've explained already, ornamentation of structure, structure as ornament, and structure as architecture. So when you look at this image, this is definitely not ornamentation of structure, that this is not a regular structure, post beam structure, which is being decorated. Secondly, structure as ornament, not really structure. It can be considered as structure as ornament, but here most importantly it is structure as architecture, because the whole tension structure, the whole tension fabric structure that this dome uses, the entire structure, that itself is the building. So for example, structure as ornament, the example that I just described, Centre Pompidou. In Centre Pompidou, there are different surfaces. There is a floor, there is a wall, there are some parts of it, and then the services are outside the building, which make the structure the aesthetics. But in this building, this entire dome itself is a structure. This building is a dome, and this whole dome is a structure, which means that this is structure as architecture, just like Eiffel Tower. It's completely a structure, but it is acting like an architectural building or an architectural piece or a monument. So our answer would be structure as architecture. Excuse me, I'll just have water. Flying buttress was used extensively in Egyptian architecture, Roman architecture, Greek architecture, and Gothic architecture. So I'll just quickly explain what is flying buttress. Buttress is an exterior support. It is usually made of masonry, and it is projecting from the face of a wall, and it serves to strengthen or to resist the thrust created by the load on the arch of or on an arch or a roof. So basically the load that is being created on the wall by a roof or an arch, it is to strengthen that load or to transfer that load more effectively, a buttress is added. A buttress is a projection. It's like a cascading projection, usually made out of masonry. That's what a buttress is. I have added one image of buttress and one image of flying buttress. Then the flying buttress came in. Firstly, buttresses were added in buildings. Then the flying buttress came in, which is also called arch buttress, and it is a specific form of buttress which is composed of arches that extends from the upper portion of a wall to a pier of great mass in order to convey lateral forces to the ground. So what happens in flying buttress is that the pier is there, the cascading pier, the mass with the pier, and then there is wall, and there are arches that connect the wall to the pier, and this extra structure that is created made of arch and the pier is called a flying buttress. So flying buttresses were a very, very important part of Gothic architecture. They were invented during that time, because during that time cathedrals became really huge, really ornamented. So they needed to find out ways to support more ways to support those buildings, those churches, and then flying buttresses solved that problem. They became an aesthetic statement as well as a very important structural element. So flying buttresses are used extensively in Gothic architecture. Question 14. User load which is removable is called dynamic load, impact load, live load, or dead load. So user load means people, furniture, machines, and movable equipment. Dynamic load means any load that changes over time. It includes environmental load like wind, seismic, and rain. Impact load means force provided by a sudden load or a structural part instead of a constant and sustained force applied over a long time. Impact load means that suddenly one force is applied. For example, putting a hammer on a wall or car crashing. Live loads are also called imposed loads, and they are either moving loads or movable loads. Dead loads are on a structure as the result of the weight of the permanent components such as beam, floor slabs, columns, and wall. So the question is, user load which is removable is called as. So the answer would be live load. Question number 15. Sun-dried earth block is called adobe, stabilized block, fly ash brick, or rammed earth block. Adobe bricks or mud bricks are made of earth with a fairly high clay content and straw. They are a fireproof, durable, yet biodegradable, non-toxic building material as they are sun-dried. Stabilized block or stabilized mud blocks are manufactured by compacting a wetted mixture of soil, sand, and stabilizer in a machine into a high-density block. Such blocks are used for the construction of load-bearing masonry. Then fly ash brick or FAB is a building material, specifically masonry units containing class C or class F fly ash and water. Rammed earth block, rammed earth building material made by compacting certain soils, used by many civilizations. In making building blocks, the soil is rammed into a box-shaped mold. Rammed earth walls, in comparison to adobe bricks, are built in more damp, humid climates where building adobe bricks are practically impossible. The difference between adobe and brick is that adobe is sun-dried, whereas a brick is kiln-fired at a very high temperature. When this happens, the clay changes and will not soften again if the brick gets wet. So adobes are made of earth with fairly high clay content and straw. They are fireproof and durable yet biodegradable. Stabilized blocks are made of wetted mixture of soil, sand and stabilizer in a machine high density block. And such blocks are used for construction of load-bearing masonry. Fly ash brick is a building material, specifically masonry units containing class C or class F fly ash and water. And rammed earth block building material is made by compacting certain soils used by many civilizations. In making building blocks, the soil is rammed into a box-shaped mold, and rammed earth walls, in comparison to adobe bricks, are built in more damp, humid climates where building adobe bricks are practically impossible. The difference between adobe and brick is that adobe is sun-dried, whereas a brick is kiln-fired at a very high temperature. When this happens, the clay changes and will not soften again if the brick gets wet. So our answer is sun-dried earth block are called adobe. Question number 16. Which of the following column type is shown in the image below? Doric, Ionic, Corinthian and Tuscan. So when you look at this, it's a very decorative capital, and secondly, also it has flutes in it. It is not plain, it has flutes in it. So because it has flutes, which means that it is Greek order, and the typical Greek orders are Doric, Ionic and Corinthian. Doric has a very plain capital like a bowl, Ionic has scroll-like capital, and Corinthian has a decorative capital. So our answer is Corinthian. Last question for today. Which of the following architectural style was used in United States Capitol in US? Baroque, Beaux Arts, Byzantine and Neoclassicism. So this is how the United States Capitol looks like. It is often called the Capitol or the Capitol building. It is the seat of the United States Congress, the legislative branch of the federal government. It is located on Capitol Hills at the eastern end of the National Mall in Washington, D.C. The construction started on 18 September 1793. The architects were William Thornton, Benjamin Henry Latrobe. It was opened in 1800. The function is office type. The floor area is 16.5 acres and the floor count is 5. So I'll quickly also go through the terms that have been the architectural eras. They've been Baroque, Beaux Arts, Neoclassicism and Byzantine. So Baroque I have already mentioned. It included a lot of dramatic churches with irregular shapes, extravagant ornamentation. In Byzantine, the capital of the Rome moved to Byzantium, which is now Istanbul. They used brick instead of stone. They had domed roofs, elaborate mosaics, classical forms. Then Beaux Arts architecture, it was more of an academic architectural style taught at the École des Beaux-Arts in Paris, particularly from the 1830s to the end of the 19th century, and it drew upon the principles of French neoclassicism, but they also incorporated Baroque and Renaissance elements, and they used modern materials such as glass and iron and later steel, and it was an important style in Europe and Americas through that time. Then neoclassicism started around 1730s to 1930. Neoclassical architecture is defined as the revival of the classical architecture during the 18th and the 19th centuries. The aesthetics is a distinct architectural style that references elements of classical antiquity, mostly ancient Greek and Roman architecture that flourished in classical times. So again, looking at the Capitol building, you can see very clearly it was built in 1700, it started building in late 1700s, and it has used the classical elements of architecture, the columns, the tribute. So our answer would be D, neoclassicism. That is all for today. If you have any questions, please ask me. And also, if you missed any questions because of the poor network, I can repeat those questions again. So if you guys have any question, please kindly write it in the chat box and I would try to answer it best to my capability. Thank you. I'm really sorry for today. There was a lot of chaos from my end. Thank you for bearing with me, all of you. Please ask your questions. Yeah, sure. I'll repeat the live question again. Thirumal, you're asking assignment first. Assignment first I have done in the previous live session. This is week 2. This is assignment 2. So if you want to go through the assignment 1, you'll have to go to you must have been provided a YouTube link via from NPTEL, and I have already recorded the whole session of assignment 1 and uploaded it on YouTube. You can go and access it there. So yeah, Ms. Apurva, I'll tell you about the live load question again. Okay, wait. Question number 14 you mean, right? User load which is removable. So, question is that the user load which is removable, it is called, and then we have 4 options: dynamic load, impact load, live load, and dead load. So I explained what is user load, and then I explained all these 4 kinds of load. So user load is anything that the users are bringing to the building. So user load would be people, because people are the users, then furniture because people need furniture, then machinery based on the building type, different kinds of machine, even including a house. We have fridge, washing machine, these are different machinery. It's even if it's not factory machinery, they're still machines and they still have load. Then equipments, they could be movable, which are movable equipments, not installed equipments, because installed equipments which cannot be moved would become, they would be user load, but they would be unremovable and probably considered as, there would be some category for it because it does not come in dead load. So the user load is basically any kind of load that the users bring, which is people, furniture, machinery, and equipment. Now, the question is that user load which can be removed from a building, what will it be called? And then the 4 terms that have been given are dynamic, impact, live, and dead. So I will first explain live and dead for more clarity. So dead load is the load that cannot be changed at all. It's a permanent load and it cannot be changed. And dead load is considered to be consisting of the structure, the load of the structure. So we need columns and beams to transfer the load to the ground. So column, beams, roofs, slabs, walls, all the parts that are part of the structure is dead load. Then what is live load? Live load are loads that are user based loads, that they are moving loads. They are called live load is because they can be moved from that place. For example, in a building, let's consider a building or even a classroom. When the classroom is filled with 50 students and 1 teacher, there are 51 people, and let's assume that each person has 60, average weight is 60. we get 4,000 kgs of weight on the room itself if in a class we have 40 students and 50 students and one teacher. So that is live load. It's temporary. It is not going to be there always, but when 50 people come together in a room, that live load is created. So that is what live load is. Then what is impact load? And impact load and dynamic load I'm only explaining for the sake because it is mentioned in the question and it would help you out. Impact load, a question on impact load was also covered in the last class if you guys remember. So impact load is a load that was not present all the time and it was a sudden load. It suddenly happened. For example, if I dropped something on the floor, that would create an impact load. If I put hammer on the wall, that would create an impact load because it's sudden. It was not there, but me putting pressure on it is creating that load. And then dynamic load is a generic term for any load that changes over time. It includes mostly environmental load, wind, seismic and rain, because wind and rain and seismic as in the earthquakes, they don't occur all the time. They change over time. This kind of load changes over time. For example, the rain load would change also depending on how much rain happened. So that is what dynamic load is. So our answer was that the user load. User load means specifically the load that the users bring to the building, which is removable, is called as, and the answer would be live load, because the user load is live load. This session is specifically, all the sessions are specifically designated to different weeks. I only have 8 live sessions and each week I have to do that week's assignment only. If I repeat the first week's assignment, it would take a lot of time, and if people have other questions, I would not be able to answer that. So I cannot really explain the first assignment, as I've already told you that the first assignment was, the first live session was all recorded, and it was I would repeat the which man-made structures question. I would check in that. So I was saying that the previous session was all recorded and it's uploaded on YouTube, and you would receive the link. You can please go through that, and the you also have received the, you might have received the link to the presentation because I have also shared that with NPTEL. So please, you can go through that, and in case after going through it, if you have any doubt at all, you can please come and ask me. Man-made question, let me check which one you are talking about. Which man-made question you are talking about, Mr. Thariman? Can you please tell me which question you are talking about? Man-made structure question? I don't understand which question you are talking about. Can you please tell me? Man-made structure question, I don't know which one you're talking about because there is no man-made structure question in this slide. Is it from the first assignment? there is no man-made question, man-made structure question in wait, I'm not able to understand you, so I'll just let you turn your mic on and then you can ask me what you're saying. That would be easier for us. Hi, can you please turn your mic on, Thirumal, and can you ask me what you're asking? I'm getting confused here, sorry. I have given the permission for you to turn your mic on. Mr. Thirumal, can you hear me? I have given you the permission to turn your mic on because I'm not able to understand what you're writing on the chat. Can you hear me? Meanwhile, if anybody has any other questions, you guys can ask while I sort this out with Thirumal. If anybody has any other questions, please let me know. Okay, I'll go with the animal architecture question. Meanwhile, just to let you know, Mr. Thirumal, I have given you access to the microphone because I'm not able to understand what you're asking me. So you can turn whenever you feel comfortable. Please turn your mic on and ask me the question. Meanwhile, I'll explain the animal architecture question. So if you guys have been through the NPTEL lecture, so there is this whole one lecture or one presentation sir has made on animal architecture, which is very well explained and in very well detail. So I'll just explain this one question that has been added here. So in this question, it was a matched the following question in which 4 options were given. 4 animals were explained basically. Name of 4 animals. Sociable weaver. Sociable weaver is a bird. And sociable weaver is a weaver bird. हिंदी में हम उसे बया बोलते हैं. So baya जो होती है or the weaver bird, it makes nests by weaving different grass and dried things she finds. So sometimes, when some kinds of weaver birds, they make an entire colony or an entire community to live together. So those kind of weaver birds are called sociable weavers. Then termite. Termite is dimak in Hindi. So termite, we all know termites. Termites live in mounds. They create their own mounds, or you can say their own fortresses or castles, you can say. So they live in that. Social wasp. Wasp, Hindi में उसको बोलते हैं बर्रा. It's a yellow insect which flies and which stings you. It's similar to bees, but it's not a bee. Social wasp is yellow in color. It's this much in size. So wasp. And then vogelkop, bowerbird. It's also a kind of bird which makes a tent-like structure. When the bowerbird wants to actually mate, so the male birds in bowerbird community, they make these tents to impress the females of the bowerbird community, and then they decorate it with fruits. So they build this whole tent-like structure with sticks and grass, and then they decorate it with fruits to impress the female bowerbirds. So talking specifically about the images, so the first image that has been added is a termite mound. It's called a termite mound or termite tower. It's a tower made by termites, and it is made out of mud. They're chewed wood, so they chew wood and spit it, and then they create these mounds, just like bees do it with nectar. So termite mound is made of mud, chewed wood, saliva and feces, and then they keep creating heights of this, and then they live under these mounds. Then bird paper nests. So wasps and bees, we know, हम छत्ता बोलते हैं हिंदी में उसे. So they make nests out of different things. So the bees make nests out of the things that they collect from. They produce their own beeswax, and then they make those hexagonal structures to live in. While wasps, barra or the barra, they create paper nests. Paper nests, it's called paper nest because it looks like a nest made out of paper. So what they do is they do the same thing, that they chew the plant pulp and then they create these layers which looks like paper. So they chew plant pulps and wooden particles and saliva secretions. So one by one they do it, and it looks like a nest made out of paper. That's why it's called a paper nest. So this is how the nest of a wasp looks like. Then third structure, it is called a bower. It is called a bower, and the bower bird is named after this. Bower means a small hut of grass, a small hut. So they make a small hut of grass and sticks. So that's why they're called bower birds. Then fourth image is a community dwelling housing of birds. So like I explained, weaver bird or baya, they make they weave their nests. That's why they're called weaver birds. They have really beautiful nests, and sometimes these weaver birds, one kind of weaver bird is a sociable weaver who live in community dwelling like the one shown in the fourth image. So you were asked to match the animal with the animal architecture they have created. So the P is sociable weaver, and we know that the fourth image is the house of a sociable weaver. So P is 4, Q is termite, and the first image is termite, so Q is 1. Then R is social wasp, which is 2, the paper nest. And then third is a bower, which is made by a bower bird. So the answer was P4, Q1, R2, S3. I hope it makes it clear. Yeah, the final exam will also be MCQ based only. As much I'm aware of, I'll just confirm for you once also. But yeah, the final exams will also be MCQ based. All the assignments are MCQ based. But you will have to have the knowledge of different buildings and how they look like, and then the different parts that have been covered in the lecture. Otherwise, it would be difficult to answer it, because not every time they might attach images. In some questions there would be images, but in many questions there might not be images. So just for that, thoroughly go through it and thoroughly go through the pictures of the buildings also, so that you can answer the questions easily. Yes, Thirumal, please tell me. I usually keep my video on as instructed by NPTEL, but because of bad internet connection, I am keeping the video off for today. Yeah, please, anybody else has any kind of questions left? Okay, I'll explain Art Deco. The questions I'm answering Shubhru right now, and I'll explain the Art Deco after that. So the buildings that have been covered in the lectures would be the only ones coming in your questions. You don't need to remember all the buildings in the entire world to be able to study this course. So whatever examples sir has given for any particular topic, whatever examples he has given in the NPTEL lectures, only those would be covered. So there is one lecture entirely on the architectural styles, how the structure and architecture varied through these architectural styles. There is entire lecture on it. So in that lecture, he has briefly described about those architectural styles of different eras and the different examples he has given for those. So you will just need to remember those things. So yeah, coming back to Art Deco, I'll just go back to that slide. Um, yeah, Art Deco came in being in the 1900s, 1950s around, and the major characteristic of Art Deco buildings is that they used decorative art but in a very geometrical form. So Chrysler building, if you actually go through the images of Chrysler building in New York, you can see that it has a lot of detailings or decorative things. They also have on the top of the tower of Chrysler building in New York, they have sun imitating art, but in a very geometric form. Yeah, if you don't have any doubts, you can absolutely leave the session. It's only for clearing out the doubts. If you don't have any doubts, you can please leave the session. Thank you. No problem. So Art Deco was actually a style of the entire style, this entire era combined product design and architecture and visual arts together, and it flourished mostly in Europe and US. And like I said, at that time, during that time in the early 90s, a lot of new machines came into being. A lot of new things came into being because of the whole advancement. So we had ships, we had cars, we had trains, we had buses, we had different furnitures, and so the design of the buildings during that time is heavily influenced by that, by the actually the design of the different technological advancement happened in that time. For example, I gave one example of ship earlier. So because all these new things were coming, all these things were so fascinating to people when ships came into being for the first time, when trains were running, and the streamlined shapes of all these new transport was so fascinating that they wanted to use those elements in the buildings itself. So they applied a lot of geometric patterns and a lot of geometric things. Then they took the streamlinedness of these transportation facilities and then applied those. And they also took one thing from ships. Uh, and they also took this idea from ships. For example, ships have these circular round windows, and it's very common in a lot of Art Deco buildings to have circular nautical buildings. So it is also inspired from nautical architecture. So this is what I know about Art Deco. Of course, it was a very huge style. You can find the other information about it on the internet, but it was majorly characterized by the fact that at that time there was a huge technological advancement, and because of that technological advancement, all this new machinery that came into being, the architecture got influenced by the style of those machinery. So the shapes of those machinery, the streamlined body of those machinery, those parts were added into buildings and somehow inspired by that. So that is the main point of Art Deco, and it is heavily characterized by geometrical patterns. They have natural occurring objects and other things in the decorative style, but they are mostly geometric. They're not organic in form. Yeah, I'll explain the Millennium Dome question again, Thirumal. I hope I was able to explain. So the question was that Millennium Dome in London is best fitted example of what? So as I explained in the start of the session, that there are 5 terms that Sir has covered in the NPTEL lectures, which is about the relationship of architecture and structure, in which are ornamentation of structure, structure as ornament, structure as architecture, structure accepted, and structure ignored. So in detail, to understand it, you can go through the lectures. That has explained very well. You can go through those lectures. I will briefly tell you what these terms mean. So first, which is ornamentation of structure, it basically means that there is a column and beam structure, normal structure, and then it is decorated. And then there is ornamentation on it. That means ornamentation of structure. Then, excuse me 1 second. Then structure as ornament, which means that structure is being used as an aesthetic element in the architecture. Then structure as architecture, which means that the entire building is just a structure and there is no other elements involved. So when you look at Millennium Dome, it's actually a tension fabric structures, which means that it has a cable tension structure, which means that there are vertical posts which hold by tension cables the fabric. So it's a tension post structure. So this Millennium Dome, the whole dome itself, the whole building is just the dome, and then the whole dome is just the structure. So that's why this is structure as architecture. I hope I was able to explain it. Okay, she's not in the meeting. Okay, any more questions? Please just let me know. I am still in the meeting. You're welcome. If you have any more questions, you can please ask. If you don't have any more questions, you may leave. Or if you want to stay in the meeting, in case somebody joins and asks more questions, you are most welcome to stay. Yeah, sure. Please leave if you don't have any more questions. Thank you so much for joining, and thank you so much for bearing with me with all the haphazard things that happened today. I'm concluding the meeting because nobody has any more questions. Thank you.